Welcome back. This is the Scaling Secrets podcast. Freddie Laker from Chameleon Collective is right here. And Freddie takes an entrepreneurial approach to problem solving, and he helps clients transform their businesses through unconventional thinking by shaping culture and driving innovative growth strategies. Now, these pillars form the foundation of Freddie's success with both startups and established global brands for over 20 years. So we're going to find out some scaling secrets from Freddie. We're going to find out what makes him tick, his problem-solving process, and so much more. So Freddie, glad to be speaking with you.
You as well. Thanks for inviting me on the show today.
Glad to have you. And so we introduced you a little bit. We hyped you up. We got everyone jazzed up to hear about you. But in your own words, what has you passionate? What's the elevator pitch for Mr. Freddie?
I appreciate the hype. I guess a quick personal introduction for anyone who may have not run into me before. I'm a lifelong serial entrepreneur. I've been starting entrepreneurial companies since I was 19 years old. I managed to build and sell a couple companies over the years, ranging from internet service providers to digital agencies. I'm quite proud of that. In full disclosure, I also spectacularly imploded my third company, which I'm not so proud of. But 2 out of 3 ain't bad's been my long-standing joke, around that. Over the last 10 years, I managed to found another 3 companies, and so far those are all really going well. I consider myself kind of an entrepreneur's entrepreneur. I have a lot of passion for other people willing to take risks and go out and start businesses, whether they're starting from day one at $0, trying to figure out how to get to their first 1,000, or they're trying to figure out how to get to 7 figures, 8 figures, or even beyond that. So I was thrilled to be on the show today, and if I can help other people, then that makes my day.
And it makes my day too. And I think that's one of those little known secrets to life, that if you help someone out, it's counterintuitive, right? You would think that if all these people help me, then that'll really get me excited. But somehow maybe it's just the human brain evolution that when we help other people, it really just kind of, that's like the secret sauce to just staying motivated and to pursuing your passion. And so you've done all these things, you've built and sold all these companies. What sets you apart? Because you think about all these entrepreneurs out there, right? And some of them have a dream and they don't act. Some just dabble. Some get things started, but they don't follow through, and these companies implode. So what do you think you have that some, maybe not everyone, but some others don't, that we can learn from?
I think that one of the things I've done, you touched on earlier, and it's about helping other people. And I think sometimes people think about that in a kind of like, hey, I'm going to do a favor for someone today, and that may be a way of improving the way that they feel about themselves or paying it forward. My belief is that you can weave this totally into the fabric of your business. So, in the name of one of my most recent ventures, and I should say, I founded with a significant group of great partners, is called Chameleon Collective, and I think that kind of collective thinking is really what led this company to success. In the last 8 years since we founded it, we've been on the Inc. 5000 3 times. It's the fastest growing business I've ever been involved in. It was completely bootstrapped, so across many tens of millions of dollars of revenue at this point, and we did that by working together. And so the thing that I would probably like to share with your audience today is, I'm sure there are lots of experts who've come on today and are on the show and talked about growth hacking or customer acquisition tricks or different little things that they may have done to start their business. Now, I would say if you're willing to think about the foundation of how you start your business in the very first moment, and maybe look at it potentially a different kind of business model, and that's the collective model. It can be a very, very powerful way for people to start their business early on. And what does that ultimately mean? It might be different people coming together and contributing different components to a business, but partners don't have to be equal. Someone might bring in one part and another person might bring in another part. There might be major partners and there might be minor partners. In the collective model, what you do is you create a system that is completely equal and equitable for everyone in it. What people get out of it and their ownership of the company is automatically proportionate to what people put into it. And so instead of kind of splitting the company up at the very beginning of the business and saying, I've done all this amazing stuff in my career, maybe I'm kind of a well-known person or whatever, I should get half the business. Another person maybe gets something else. in our model, what we did was we said, we're all going to agree on the way this company is going to work. And depending on how deep your performance is, that's going to decide your ownership share, that's going to determine your earnings. Everything is completely performance based. And what that actually did for us was it created a company that outperformed any business I've ever been in, because everyone that was involved was hyper motivated to try and grow the business together. And they knew that the rules of the game were that they were going to receive something fair that worked for them, that everyone understood day one, and the rules weren't going to get changed halfway down the road, like a lot of us have probably had in a lot of the corporate jobs we've had, where maybe you pay your dues at some company for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 plus years, and one day someone decides to change all the rules, and all that work that you put in your career goes out the window, and probably not to your benefit, very likely to the benefit of some people that sit far up the food chain. And maybe what's good for them isn't necessarily good for you. And so I guess if I had to simply say this, I think there's ways of building businesses that are not a zero sum game. I don't believe that other people have to fail for me to succeed. And I think if other people are willing to look at ways of building their own business that way, what they're actually going to do is they're going to attract equals. If you build a business model that is all about you and everyone else is at a different level, you're going to attract people that are willing to be the B player or the C player, so you can be the A player. If you build a model that's equitable, you're going to attract your peers. And so one of the things, the reason we've grown so fast is I have a lot of partners who I consider my peers and my equals. And because of the way our business is organized, we've been able to run faster than any company I've ever had the pleasure of working in before. And frankly, as a final thought, and it's also the happiest I've ever been, because I feel like the wealth and the success is distributed. So I'm surrounded by people who also feel successful, which makes me feel even more successful.
Amazing. Well, you've accomplished something very interesting here. And this idea that you're sharing here about the zero sum game, I think about that a lot, right? The zero sum, the scarcity, the employee mindset of, well, I'm going to get paid this amount. So then it's in my best interest to put in like the bare minimum amount of effort and bare minimum amount of time. And it's just like a very just short-sighted equation. And then versus when you want to be an entrepreneur, when you interview people like yourself who accomplish these amazing things, they say, I don't care how much work or how much time or how much effort, I'm just looking to just like grow things. I'm looking to make it that equation that it adds up to be some huge amount that's always increasing, so that way I'm not limiting myself. But you think that in this whole collective idea, that works if all of these peers that are on the boat with you, if they're all doing the same as you. So how do you avoid things falling apart? Because sometimes you have some friend, but then when you actually are in business together, then the true colors come out, or maybe people get distracted or lose motivation. So how do you avoid these problems? How do you get everyone to stay just as enthused and passionate as you?
Yeah, so just to transparency, so the Chameleon Collective, this business is a professional services company. So we're providing, like consulting and marketing service, sales service, things like that for other people. So we get paid for people's time, whether that's on a project basis or a T&M basis, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's a professional services business. And the way that we structure our company is everyone basically is on a giant performance model. So none of our people are on salaries. All of our people get paid a disproportionately high amount of the money that comes in. So in a normal company, in a professional services company, the owner basically wants to pay you what I'm going to call wholesale. So they want to pay you as low as they can. They want to charge the client as high as they can. And that owner, for accepting all of the risk, makes the money on the spread. And you know what? I would argue if that's the arrangement that people want, that is a fair arrangement on some level. What we're saying is people are gonna accept risk with us, but they're also going to get the upside. And so if people are willing to accept the downside, then we're going to give them the upside as well. So in our model, everyone charges retail, so to speak. So everyone's getting the retail price of whatever they would charge the market. We all contribute a little bit of our time and a little bit of our money to a central model that we use to run the company. That little bit of money pays for our core infrastructure, the billing team, the sales team, our legal team, marketing team, things like that. The time that we contribute We use that to solve big issues. Last year, we rebranded the whole company, and the company will put in effort together to make that happen. And we use that contribution of time and money to run the company extremely leanly. Our operating costs are a tiny fraction of any other company I've ever been in. Going back to your very specific answer, like how do you keep people motivated? Well, in this model, if people aren't good, they kind of die on the vine. And the people that are really good, they get very busy and they get booked up, and it's then it becomes market dynamics. One of my favorite questions when someone on our team goes, "I'm booked solid. What do I do? I'm working crazy hours." Give yourself a raise your rate. And that's a quick way of kind of adjusting, how much deal flow that someone has. And I love that in our model, it's not my decision or some business owner's decision of how someone's money they make. They determine how much money they make by kind of adjusting their rate and the amount of work that they want to take at any given time. In the inverse of that, if someone is not a pleasure to work with, if someone is not very good at their job, if someone starts to develop a bad reputation within our peers or with our clients, they also start to suffer. And and in a normal hierarchical organization, that there's some manager that's someplace and goes, Bob's the imaginary guy I always like to make fun of. So Bob's really doing a bad job. We're going to have to put him on some performance plan. But turns out Bob's also the cousin of the CEO, and for some reason, no one ever wants to fire Bob because Bob's the cousin of the CEO. And you've always got this one random person in the company that's a low performer that no one wants to work with, but still keeps showing up on every project. In our model, that just doesn't happen. And so what I find is that we've had to, very rarely do we ever have to fire someone. We've had the odd random situations like anybody else, but our model drives it, because when you don't do those high performing things, you don't get selected to put in projects. Clients aren't directly engaging you. Other people are asking you to collaborate with them, and they just stop making enough money. And they kind of go, I couldn't provide, succeed in this market. And so while I feel that one part of our model is highly supportive and collaborative, and we're trying to make people be really successful in this model together. Simultaneously, it also is I don't think cutthroat's the right word, but it weeds out low performers. And so our system constantly churns out the people that aren't strong enough to run with the pack. As we continue to grow, we keep accumulating more and more and more of these high performers, constantly weeding out the people that can't survive on their own merit. And and uh, and I and I love it, honestly. I don't feel like I'm in an environment anymore where all the stress comes back to me as an entrepreneur, because I had to either personally take on the risk and the cost of all the people that maybe weren't up to par. My upside is slightly lower, but my downside is very low. And I find that even though it's a very different kind of model, is actually, for me personally, it's been the most successful I've ever had an opportunity to be. But I know that's because I'm surrounded by so many other high performing people. I think too many businesses out there are what I've sometimes heard described as a genius and a million helpers, or maybe a couple of geniuses and a million helpers. And I'd rather be in a company with a million geniuses. I'm not saying that's what Chameleon Collective is, but my point is I'd rather have a bunch, be top heavy, and have a bunch of other people that can run really fast and do really good work with me at all times. I'm less stressed, and my clients are happier.
And is there ever an ego problem with that happening? We were just kind of covering well, do you have a lazy person who drags someone down? But then there might be like the other extreme, right? Where you have all these people who are just like so focused and so
Yeah.
passionate and want things to be done a certain way. And I imagine with us entrepreneurs and the inflated egos, sometimes you might butt heads. So what happens there?
I love that you asked this question. That was a very, very astute of you to kind of go there. So another one of the interesting dynamics of how Chameleon Collective works is we have no formal hierarchy. So the way that our hierarchy works, we use a derivative of management style called holacracy. And effectively, what this means is we reorg our leadership structure on the fly, depending who owns the client relationship. So let's say you were part of Chameleon Collective and you said, "Hey, Freddie, I need your help on this project. I'm working with a specific client. Doesn't matter if I was the founder. I work for you. You're the boss. I work for you. No problem. If it's my client and I needed you, I'm the boss." But when we're not working on clients, there's no hierarchy whatsoever. And so whether you're a junior designer or a CMO level C-suite exec with inside the collective, we're equal in terms of votes and things like that, in terms of how we make a lot of our decision making. This in itself inherently eliminates a lot of people that have those ego issues, because I find that people that want to ladder climb, when they work out that they can't ladder climb with inside Chameleon Collective, it knocks them off at the door. The other thing is, people ask, sometimes I tell them about how our company works, and they say, "Look, it sounds a little bit too good to be true," and I say there is a catch. In a collective model, while it may sound extremely inclusive, it's actually very important that it's exclusive. And so we make it very, very, very hard for people to get into Chameleon Collective. And one of the biggest things we're screening for is that we actually find that finding really smart people who have incredible backgrounds is actually the easiest part of the equation, because luckily our group kind of attracts more people like that. But the hardest part we're finding is finding what I call them we people. And so we want we people, not me people. So during our kind of screening processes, we start to notice people that are very focused on me, and everything kind of revolves around them, and we can tell that they won't be able to work in a non-hierarchical environment, and they have those kind of ego issues you mentioned. Instant deal killer for us, because it doesn't work. You're absolutely right. It's so important that we have a basically zero tolerance factor for it. If we pick it up at all during the interview process, it doesn't work. So our model isn't, I guess, for everyone. And I would say that, for anyone who might be listening now saying this is interesting but crazy, or not for me, or whatever, I'd say that when I tell people about how we work, it's not about it being right or wrong, or worse than another business model. I would say that for some people, this is the best way to work. And I'd give as a kind of a final thought of helping you visualize how I think about the collective model. Imagine a spectrum. On the far right side of that spectrum, you've got being a traditional employee. You have very low risk. You show up for work, try not to piss your boss off too much. You get a paycheck. You have some very nice things. You've got probably a good community. You have a lot of infrastructure to run your job. You have a lot of predictability. On the downside, you don't have a lot of freedom. You can't pick and choose how you work, who you work for, where you work. It's maybe low on the freedom side. Opposite end of the spectrum, you've got being an entrepreneur. I've done it many times. It comes with this great haircut if you do it too many times, so be warned. But think about being an entrepreneur. It's extremely risky, but you could have a potentially huge upside. You could build a big company and sell it one day if that's your thing. It comes with a lot of freedom. You can pick and choose how you work, who you work for, who you work with, where you work. And as long as you're making money, when you're struggling with cash, even that freedom can be taken away from you, unfortunately. You don't have a lot of infrastructure. You may not have a lot of community. You may not have a lot of predictability. But there's obvious, huge upside to going down that path. Otherwise, so many people wouldn't try it. But I think the collective model is it sits right in between these two things. I think it takes all the best things about being an entrepreneur. You have a lot of freedom about how you choose, how you work. It has higher upside than being an employee. Probably not quite as much upside as being a full-blown entrepreneur, because now you're sharing the wealth with other people. But it takes the best things about from the employee side of the equation. You've got infrastructure, you have community, it's more predictable, it's less risky. And so I think for some people, I think I've thought there's two choices. You've got this, be the employee side or the entrepreneur side. You've got be the employee side. And I think what we're trying to say at Chameleon Collective is that there's another choice that sits in between these two choices. And for some people, it's the coolest thing they've ever heard. It's something that we've found people are looking for and saying, no one's ever pitched me on this idea before. This was the balance that I was looking for. And that's certainly where I felt when I started going down this path. It was the first company I started after the third company of mine that failed. And I was tired. I was beat up. I was exhausted. I didn't have the courage to start another company. I didn't want the stress to start another company. I didn't want a huge payroll hanging over my head. I didn't want all those things. I didn't want all these employees reporting back to me. I just had a job that I wasn't particularly happy with, where I didn't like my boss very much. And I also knew I didn't want to go work for the man again. And I was so frustrated at the time that I started going out to be an independent consultant. Frankly, I swore to everyone that would talk to me for more than 5 minutes I was never ever going to start another company again. And over time, I started talking to other people that had these kind of same feelings that I did. And we put together this very non-traditional model. And honestly, we used to think it was totally insane. We used to laugh about it all the time. This is kooky. No one would take this seriously. But then we kept adding and growing and growing. And then we hit the, I think 5,000 for the first time. Then we hit the second time. Now we hit the third time. Now it's one of the largest businesses I've ever operated or been part of, one of a key operator. And it would be a more fair way of saying that. And I've never been a more bigger believer in this. I'm halfway through writing a book about this right now called Collective Capitalism. I'm really passionate about the subject. I think it's just another path for entrepreneurs to consider.
You've developed something amazing here. And I love your thought process here of like, you think of your situation, right? Your employment or your business situation. It's not good or bad. But then when you're thinking about self-awareness or is what you're doing in life a good fit, it's hard to attack that. But if you break down like, what are my 6 or 7 factors? How much do I value the risk or the freedom or in putting up with eating crow, so to speak, or whatever? Like you think about what are all those different levels. And then if you're a full-on employee or full-on entrepreneur, like we said, it's not good or bad. It's just a matter of where all these different attributes at and how do you fit with that. And you might not even know how well of a fit these different levels are unless you jump in, and it might change over the course of your life or your career or your family or your location or whatever. And so you've come up with this crazy idea and you tried it out and you say, for sure not for everyone, but those who it is right for, they really thrive in a way that they haven't before. And so we've been talking a lot about your vision here and getting the right people here. But as far as like the path in growing it, right? And hitting the Inc. 5000, they say success is not a straight line. So what do you have a fun story to share with us near the end here about just like the missteps, the headaches, the stress in going from point A to point B and scaling this thing?
Wow, I'm sure this is the same reaction a lot of entrepreneurs would say, but yeah, how many hours do we have, right? So it's been a hell of a journey. I'd say that the challenges and the missteps were kind of different at all the different stages of the company. Um, I think the biggest thing that I would kind of warn other folks out there as they're scaling their businesses is the needs that you may have at different stages and the challenges you have at different stages are going to be wildly different. And so to someone out there who might be even thinking about who the people they want to partner with or even who their first employees are, um, trying to understand who can grow with you is really challenging. The types of things that you might be doing when you're, um, you know, 1 to 10 people, and everyone really knows each other and it's a family and you haven't had to deal with massive scaling issues yet, present one set of problems. Then once you start getting up to 70, 80, 90, 100 odd people, and everyone doesn't know each other instantly, and you're starting to, who's that guy I just saw in the meeting again? And people are trying to understand at that scale of the business, how do you handle it? And it brings a whole new set of expenses and infrastructure that you have to develop for yourself. um, and that's the part I see a lot of people kind of struggle to get to or struggle to get past, because all of a sudden it requires a totally different set of skills when people kind of go from like, hey, I can just hustle my way through this, to, hey, I really need to have some experience on understanding how to scale this beautiful thing I made. And when I say I made, I'm talking about any entrepreneur out there thinking about the business they made without breaking it. And if I thought about the kind of good story of maybe, I'll tell you actually one of my favorite stories of moments gone wrong that somehow turned into a positive moment. I guess this would be about 15 years or so ago. I was building it was my second company, and we were an advertising agency, and we were building the website for De Beers for a diamondisforever.com. It was a very high profile site. We were working with one of the biggest ad agencies in the world, one of the biggest brands in the world, and it had to come out in time for a massive $100 million plus media campaign. And right in the middle of it, uh, a hurricane came in. The agency was based in South Florida, and a hurricane hit us, and the client basically said, "Look, guys, we're really, really sorry this is happening to you, but dot dot dot. If you guys don't finish this thing by the deadline and we miss out on tens of millions of dollars of media in the first couple of weeks, we'll have no choice but to basically sue you into oblivion." And so let's say that was maybe a little bit stressful. It was one of our biggest opportunities of all time, and all of a sudden about to explode in our face. And so now we had a bigger problem. There was no power in South Florida at the time. People don't think about this. When the electricity goes out, of course, you can't run your computers and all the obvious things, but it never dawned on me until this happened. That means none of the gas stations work because the gas stations need electricity to pump gas, and all of a sudden, basically, no one can get gas in their car. And so we find for all the guys that we work with, one guy has got power at his house. And we basically took all the computers from the office, moved them to this guy's living room, and reset up, all the devs and designers basically at this guy's house. But then we had a bigger problem. We all started running out of gasoline because no one could basically get over to his house because it was kind of on the edges of South Florida. So my job basically became, I was our gas delivery guy. So every morning I would wake up, and the lines to get gas were 3 hours long because they would ration the amount of gas you could get because there was so few gas stations running. And these guys would program and design all day. And I would literally go to the gas station, wait 3 hours, fill 2 tanks up, drive it back to the house, put a couple gallons in each person's car, turn around, and go right back. And I would do that for about 3 times a day. So about 8 to 9 hours a day of just being the gas delivery guy for the company. We did actually get the project delivered on time. It was a big, big success and a big award winner. But I guess the message I'd say, and the lesson beyond being, sometimes you just gotta roll your sleeves up and make it happen no matter what, is I would say for any other founders or any other CEOs out there, I think you should always think of yourself as subservient to your staff versus the other way around. You exist to try and make them successful versus them existing to make you successful. And that means that no job is beneath you if that makes sure that the team succeeds, which ultimately is going to make sure that you succeed, even if that means being the gasoline delivery guy. I hope that would be my crazy story of the day for you. But again, I got a couple more tucked away, I'm sure.
And you can put those other stories in the book, right? So to get us
They'll be in the
super
book.
excited about the adventures that you've gone on, and we can vicariously live through you. And I'm sure it was stressful at the time, but it's also fun to look back on, just having that fun adventure of just doing whatever the heck that you have to do in order to get the job done. And this whole lesson that you also put in here about pivoting, basically, like I think about that a lot too, and you hear about that a lot from successful business owners. Just this idea of, well, am I going to just be dug in and stick to my guns and just pursue one path, or am I going to be loosey? And it's like, well, you get on a path until you outgrow it, until you get to whatever that milestone is, right? 20 employees, 50 employees, a million a year, or 10 million a year. And then what got you, you can't start acting like a $10 million company from the beginning. You have to get to those other milestones first, but then you outgrow them, and then it requires kind of taking a different path and kind of a lot to think about, and a lot to kind of have that recurring self-awareness and self-examination, and kind of maybe getting outside of your comfort zone, and all those other things. And just, you shared with us these lessons and these fun stories about what you've accomplished. So now it's promotion time, right? It's now time to make that plug. So what's the next step here? If someone was really impressed by what you built here with your collective, with a Chameleon Collective, how do they get in touch with you? How do they find out about your company? How do they know if they're a good fit to join this?
I appreciate that. I'd say for anyone out there, if you have with branding, marketing, customer experience, e-commerce, sales, kind of anything that touches a customer. So customer-centric challenges. If you have a challenge like that, you should probably be thinking about what we do. We position ourselves as a business transformation company, even though we work in all those areas, which I know can sound a little bit lofty at times. But we have a really interesting way that we work. We've got a bench of kind of interim and fractional C-suite leaders that work in all of those areas, and we actually deploy those leaders on an interim and fractional basis into our clients. This is why we're called chameleons. So we kind of change people from the inside out, so we can use these leaders to work within our clients' orgs to help solve these challenges. We've got another very large bench of subject matter experts. So kind of very delivery focused people ranging from, a designer, a copywriter, a UX person, a brand strategist, whatever it may be, a sales manager, but people that really can kind of hands on keyboard, get in there and push forward the strategy and make sure it gets executed. And then we have a third group where we basically have a bunch of recruiters. And so our pitch to clients is, if you've got challenges in these areas, we can basically deploy the first two lines of people to help you solve kind of your short-term challenges. And then, unlike, let's say, an agency or a traditional consulting firm, our model is not to kind of get embedded inside their organization forever. We want to come in, have a big impact, help build the strategy and the muscle memory into the org, and then we can use our recruiting bench to basically hire any gaps that might exist in the org and kind of work ourselves out of a job, which is sometimes we kind of riff on this idea like, when you're good, we're gone. And I don't think that's something that people normally associate to consultants or things like that. But our goal is ultimately not to be in the long run. We want to transform our clients, and if we're not transforming them, then we didn't really succeed at what we set out to do. If they want to learn more about me, visit chameleoncollective.com. Easy to get a hold of me through any of the kind of contact channels there. And I hope my guidance was useful, and so my experience can be beneficial to your guys' audience. And if someone's inspired by the way we work or wants to learn more about us, that's the best place to start.
Fantastic. So chameleoncollective.com, is that right?
That's right. And
All
also
right. Well,
people can look me
fantastic.
up
And
if they want to find me there.
well, cool. And that's Freddie Lake on LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Yeah, Freddie Laker. It's linkedin.com/in/Freddie Laker.
Nice. And so, right as we are about to wrap up this conversation here, Freddie, I always like to put my guest on the spot, if you'll indulge me a little bit, with a favorite quote or lesson that really applies here. That way we can really hit it home, knock it out of the park, and leave them wanting more. So what comes to mind to you as far as a quote or lesson just to drop in at the end here today?
One of the people that had the biggest influence on my life was actually my father. And my father was also an entrepreneur called Sir Freddie Laker. And it's the English half of my accent. And he was a kind of a notable entrepreneur from the aviation world. And he was probably as notable for some of his kind of great successes as he was for also some of the challenges and failures he had. And one time he said to me, son, he goes, when you're talking about reputation and the way that you address reputation, he said, your reputation is the only thing in this world that no one can take away from you. He goes, you can give it away through your actions, but as long as you operate the right way and you don't expose yourself in some way to losing your reputation, no one can take it away. So you have to always, that's something that stuck with me my whole life. And I can tell you that having a reputation of someone of integrity who does the right thing, does what he says he's going to do, is ethical, and I like to believe tries to represent the right way to do business, has served me really well. And I think for anyone out there that whether they're in the early stages of their entrepreneurial journey or they're later on in it, I think just remember that even if you're having a bad day, even if you have a startup or a company that's failing right now, no one can ever take your reputation away as long as you handle things the right way.
I love that. That is powerful. And we will be thinking about that and chewing on that as we go and find Freddie Laker on LinkedIn, and also going to chameleoncollective.com if you fit into one of those buckets that Freddie mentioned, whether you want to join the company and get through the process, or if your company needs help from Freddie and his team. So thank you very much, Freddie, for stopping by and wowing us with your advice and your stories. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, it was great meeting you. Thank you so much for having me on. Good stuff.